This site, right next to the Berlin Wall between East and West Berlin, is where Roger Waters, a founder member of Pink Floyd, will perform the classic work, The Wall, to raise money for the Memorial Fund for Disaster Relief, a new international charity founded by Group Captain Leonard Cheshire VC.
Unless we take into account the needs of other people, it's to our own loss. So everything that's happening to me is great hope for the future. And the terrible memory of war is receding. I'm sure, I know that world war will never happen again because the weapon's too powerful. But you've still got to build peace. You've got to work to try and make life better for those that are oppressed and or under injustice, and try and do away with confrontation and divisions.
Waters will bring a cast of some of the world's top stars to perform in Berlin's Potsdamer Platz, in the shadow of the Brandenburg Gate. Roger Waters, who left Pink Floyd 3 years ago to pursue a solo career, has until now refused to perform his work outdoors. But for him, this project was enough to change his mind, especially when the Berlin Wall came down on November the 9th last year.
The atmosphere here with the, East German border guards and the people that are involved with this site and have been sort of keeping everybody off it for the last 40 years is very, I don't know if you've felt it, but they're so glad that this is happening, and so am I.
The production costs, estimated at over £6 million, are already covered by the sale of rights, and sponsorship is being negotiated.
But at the end of it, if we tear our walls down and maybe we get better and we feel happier and the world becomes a better place. And it's been criticised often in the past as being naive and simplistic and so on. And so, well, maybe it is. But I have no worries about being called an idealist. I am.
The concert is going to be heavy on theatrics, with planes and troops from East and West involved in the spectacle. The set is planned to be 200 metres long and 20 metres high. The team hope to ultimately raise £500 million. The event will take place on July the 21st and will be shown live on television to a global audience.
Shall we drive a more powerful car? Shall we work straight through the night?
Roger Waters and his visions of psychology.
Distinctive vocals of Kate Bush and Love and Anger, featuring God's guitarist Pink Floyd's Dave Gilmour. Creation of his brainchild, The Wall. MTV caught up with Roger Waters in Berlin.
The reason that I'm doing The Wall again is because I said I would. If The Wall ever came down in Berlin, I said I would go there and perform the work again as an act of celebration at the freeing up of the feelings between the peoples from the East and the West.
And so former Pink Floyd frontman and conceptualist Roger Waters found himself in newly liberated Berlin last week to announce plans to recreate The Wall, the 1979 album and 1982 movie about a rock star who's alienated himself from the outside world.
If it draws attention to the fact that this is a fundamental psychological burden that human beings carry, that this can happen, well, good. That's what the piece is about. And but at the end of it, if we tear our walls down and maybe we get better and we feel happier and the world becomes a better place.
The massive Wall show, which received only limited live performances a decade ago, will be revived July 21st near the world's most infamous wall at Potsdamer Platz in neutral Berlin between East and West. Many of the show's original set designs will be reconstructed, but what won't be there is Waters' old band. Still, he says The Wall is bigger than Pink Floyd.
I'm perfectly happy to be performing this piece with other musicians. I think the piece stands up, and I think it could be performed by somebody other than me as well,
Backing Waters up in the show will be the Berlin Symphony Orchestra and a still-to-be-named cast of all-star rock musicians.
I've approached a number of figures and musicians, singers. I've had a number of very positive response from everybody that I've approached. I've got one or two who are locked in, who've signed on the dotted line and will be here, but we're not going to announce any names until we've got them all.
The wall's return is not just for symbolic east-west reasons. It's also got a very real beneficiary. Proceeds will go to a British-based charity which provides relief to victims of disasters. But what about the almost childlike sentimentality of Pink Floyd's The Wall? Will it still hold up some 10 years later?
It's been criticised often in the past as being naive and simplistic and so on. And so, well, maybe it is, but I have no worries about being called an idealist. I am.
I guess we need every idealist we can find.
The great illustrations to the music more than helped you. The Wall is to be staged by the most infamous one of all, that is the Berlin one, and there'll be an auction as well.
The music of Roger Waters, realised visually by artist Gerald Scarfe, achieved cult status on its release as a film in 1982, helping to push sales of the album up to 19 million.
Roger Waters came to me about 8-10 years ago and played me the raw tapes of The Wall and said that we would be making a film of it and a show of it. All of which we did, and then we started thinking about what images would go with the music and what parts we would illustrate. I just draw the master drawings, which I pass to the master animators, and they draw out all the main movements. So if a man took his hat off, you draw that, and you draw that. And then there are people called in-betweeners who do all the drawings in between like that, that make up the movement.
To promote the auction, the artwork will be exhibited in Berlin, coinciding with the charity concert of The Wall, which is to be performed by Roger Waters in 10 days' time on the site of the old Berlin Wall. A major theatrical and musical spectacle, it'll be the most expensive single concert ever, as a styrofoam wall 600 feet long and 60 feet high is built, to be knocked down at the climax of the show.
And this afternoon we start on our main production rehearsals, rehearsing the bricklayers who will build the wall during the show. The Wall, of course, is one of the main performers in the show, apart from the musicians.
The aim of the concert and its organiser, Roger Waters, is to aid the charity founded by Leonard Cheshire, an international fund for disaster relief.
I like the theme of the concert, which is of The Wall, which is don't build walls around yourselves. You make yourself a monster when you do. Open yourself to the world, which is my thinking, and really the idea of the Memorial Fund.
Now, the auction that's taking place around the cartoon work, how is that involved with the concert and the charity?
The auction's complete news to me. I hadn't heard about an auction.
Publicity from the sale of the artwork is being raised at the same time as publicity for the concert in Berlin, and it's important to distinguish between the two. The concert in Berlin is in aid of the Memorial Fund for Disaster Relief. The sale of the artwork is a private venture, although a selection of props from the concert will be on sale at the same auction in aid of the charity.
The artwork, which is owned by Roger Waters and Gerald Scarfe, is expected to realise a total of £300,000.
Do you think that people might feel that this is making use of the opportunity of the charity event in order for a simply commercial venture?
Well, I hope not, because there was no intention to do that at all. It just seemed... the two came together coincidentally. Roger and I decided to sell these quite separately from any decision about putting on the show.
Which came first, the decision for the show or this sale?
I'm not sure, because Roger made the decisions. I'm not sure which one he made first, but I talked to him about selling these drawings many years ago.
Busy with rehearsals, Roger Waters was unavailable for interview. The auction of the artwork takes place in September.
Great to have one of those original cells, would it not? C-E-L-S.
Pink Floyd's The Wall. Rona Elliott was there.
Almost 200,000 people crowded onto the original site of the Berlin Wall, once known as the Death Strip, to watch the 2-hour show. The audience came from all over the world, east and west. The concert was a benefit for the Memorial Fund for Disaster Relief, created by Sir Leonard Cheshire, a World War II bomber pilot. He aims to raise $1 billion for the fund. That's $10 for each life lost in wars this century.
By remembering a past life lost, you can save a future one.
East Germans looked on at a spectacle that less than a year ago would have been beyond their imagination. The West German group, the Scorpions, were in disbelief too. They'd never played in the East before. They'd always been banned.
People coming together, and music seems to be the bridge between cultures.
Right.
While this event was a theatrical extravaganza, for many of the young people, it symbolized their hopes and dreams as the bricks came tumbling down. Rona Elliott, NBC News, Berlin.
That's the news, and of course...
The spectacular outdoor concert was held at the site of the Berlin Wall in East Germany, where hundreds died over the years trying to escape to the west. Among the performers, Cyndi Lauper and the band Pink Floyd. It was played before a massive polystyrene wall, brought symbolically crashing down at the end. Pretty spectacular sight, Bro.
Oh, yes. Well, this week the wall came down between East and West Berlin. No, we're not very slow, not really. It's not that wall, but the Pink Floyd's wall. Thousands turned out to see the Floyd album recreated on stage at Potsdamer Platz, no man's land where the real wall separated Berlin for 30 years. Former Pink Floyd guitarist Roger Waters made it all happen. Set guitar.
We thought of doing it in Wall Street and Red Square and the Gobi Desert and you name it, we thought of it, and all kinds of different things. Then, of course, in November the 9th, they opened the wall just 100 yards from here, and our decision was made for us.
For me to behave. That's kind of like my natural behavior. I know Roger just said, well, you know, rebel rousing. I've seen you do it. It's like, oh, okay.
Mother, should I build a wall?
It represents the wall of, rubbish that you get fed with from the time that you're a child, from your school or your parents, not on purpose but accidentally through people's ignorance, and that causes people to be very unhappy and very inhibited, and that's something that I believe very much. So
if you consider that for 29 years there was nothing here but the East German border police and a host of rabbits, well, the border police have gone away, the rabbits are underground, and it's free territory. If you consider too it's where Hitler's bunker was, something quite extraordinary is happening here today.
Yeah, and stay tuned to the 9 Network, because there's a very, very good chance we will be presenting the wall in its entirety for weeks to come. It's a spectacular concert feature.
Needed, and it's now 17 years since Roger Waters wrote The Wall for Pink Floyd. Bob Geldof organised the Band Aid concert, while group captain Leonard Cheshire has been repenting his role at the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima ever since World War II. All three men come together in Berlin this weekend for a rock concert to raise money for the victims of disasters, wars included. Rona Elliott reports.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.
Since its release in 1979, Pink Floyd's album The Wall, the brainchild of Roger Waters, has sold an astonishing 19 million copies worldwide. It was so popular in 1982 the movie was released starring Bob Geldof. While The Wall had been played live on a handful of occasions, Waters never expected to perform the work again. But he changed his mind when asked to do it for the Memorial Fund for Disaster Relief.
I said, well, maybe I would do it. If they ever take the Berlin Wall down, I'll go and do it there as an act of celebration. But it was fraught with problems. We looked at the Grand Canyon and the Gobi Desert and Red Square, and Wall Street was my favorite. I thought that there would be something ironic but also dramatic about performing the piece in Wall Street. But it was beginning to kind of grind a bit until November the 9th when the wall came down.
The original idea for this unique live event came from Sir Leonard Cheshire, famous in England for his charity work.
The idea is to create a global fund for disaster relief, but I've related it to those who lost their lives in the wars of this century. 100 million. My aim is to collect $10 as a permanent memorial, living memorial, to each life. A fund of $1 billion.
Cheshire and Waters flew out to Berlin a couple of days after the wall came down to look for a concert location. They picked the historic site of Potsdamer Platz, a scrubby area of no man's land between East and West Berlin. Once known as the busiest place in Europe, and since 1961 as the Death Strip, it was the heavily mined and guarded area that distanced East from West. Promoters claim the Wall 1990 set will be the largest ever built. Construction has taken over a month. It will feature a specially erected 600-foot-high wall. Monster puppets the size of 6-story buildings will loom over the audience, and helicopters with searchlights will sweep over the crowd.
Essentially, it's a theatrical performance. One of the events of musical theatre of this decade, 100 years, millennium, whatever you want to call it.
Cheshire hopes that his fund will raise money to be used for future disaster aid.
I know of disasters, dreadful disasters, that never mention the newspapers. The other day, 2,000 people killed in South India by a cyclone, hardly mentioned in the newspaper. So my eyes are set on that.
What do you expect to happen actually the day of the concert?
I'd like to see as many people tuned into it as possible. I'd like them sharing in the joy. You have to have joy in life. But in the knowledge that this is remembering some past sacrifice of whatever nationality. And I think the linking of remembering a past life lost with saving a future one has an inbuilt appeal.
Going to be some concert.